What is a clause? A clause expresses one state of affairs or situation, one action, event, or state. And so a clause is one verb with its modifiers, one verb with all of the other words that tell us more about that verb's action or event or state. A clause can be a whole sentence all on its own. So, I want pizza. There's one verb there, and the words I and pizza both tell us more about that wanting. So that's one clause. But a single sentence can also have several clauses. We might say, I want to eat pizza. There we have two clauses nested one inside the other. The verb want, and I modifies want, tells us who's doing the wanting. Now, I want something, but when we describe what it is we want, we use another verb, to eat. That's the infinitive, to eat pizza. So because we have two verbs, we have two clauses based on those two verbs. And you can see by the way I've arranged the square brackets there, pizza now is part of this inner clause because it's telling us what we want to eat. But I is the subject of want as part of that outer clause. In this last sentence here, we can see two clauses set side by side with a conjunction, but. I like pizza, like is a verb, and I and pizza are telling us more about that liking. But, now another clause, I don't want, another verb, to eat it now. And you can see there's another nested clause in there describing what it is we want. Because we have another verb there, it's another inner clause. So clauses, as you can see, can be set side by side. I like pizza, I don't want. And clauses can also be nested one inside the other. I don't want to eat it now. I want to eat pizza. The clause in Greek is the basic building block of Greek sentences. In fact, sentences really are less important in Greek than clauses are. And in ancient Greek, often the only punctuation that was used would mark the end of clauses, not necessarily what we think of as sentences. And this sometimes gets difficult to translate because you'll have clause after clause after clause connected by conjunctions, and it's a little bit arbitrary where we put the end of a sentence in English translation. In Greek, it's the verb that's the heart of the clause, not the subject. And this is much more so than in English. In English, we usually talk about a clause as a subject and predicate. That makes the subject the real focus of an English clause, and everything else in the clause is telling us about the subject. But the subject is very often contained implicitly in the Greek verb. And we'll see later when we learn about verbs that you often don't need to express the subject at all. So it's not the subject that's the focus, it's the verb, it's the action that's the focus. And the subject isn't necessarily at the beginning of the sentence like it is in English. The subject, if it is expressed separately, might come at the end of the clause or somewhere in the middle. It's not privileged. So rather than thinking in terms of a clause being subject and predicate, I think it's more natural in Greek for us to think about a clause as a verb and all of the other words that tell us more about that verb's action. In other words, a verb and all its modifiers. After all, a verb, all on its own, one word, can be a complete Greek clause. The verb then in Greek expresses the core situation, and all of the other parts of the clause fill out our picture of that core situation. They modify or add to the idea expressed by the verb. The subject of the clause is just one kind of modifier. It tells us who or what is doing the action, but it's not necessarily the most important information. So here She is the subject, and so I've colored it blue. And ran is the verb, and so I've colored it tan. She ran. In English, we would think of this as she being the subject and ran being the predicate. But for thinking about Greek, I think it's better to think about ran, that action of running, as the core of the sentence. That's the basic idea, the core of the clause. Running. And then if we want to know more about that action of running, we say that it's she who is doing the running. So she, the subject, is a modifier of the verb ran, because it's telling us who it is that did the running. Now there's another kind of clause in Greek that we're actually going to be using a lot more to begin with, because we're not going to learn verbs for another few batch sets in Paideia. And so verbless clauses actually have no verb at all. At least there's not one explicit. So we can have a sentence or a clause made up entirely of nouns, like this one, Maria Mater, Maria mother. Where's the verb? Well, in verbless clauses, the verb to be is assumed. So the verb to be is still in many ways the core of this clause, because the clause is about what is. Something exists. And the question is, what is it that exists? The parts of a verbless clause then are the subject, the copula, which is the verb to be and is hidden in a verbless clause, and the complement. And we can think of both the subject and the complement as modifying that basic assumed hidden copula, that verb to be. What is it that is? That's the basic question that a verbless clause is trying to answer. So both the subject and the complement in a verbless clause are in the nominative case. That means that we have to decide from context which one is the subject and which one is the complement. Is this sentence Maria Mater, is it saying Maria is a mother, or is it saying mother is Maria? In theory, it could be either one, but usually the subject of the verbless clause will be definite. In other words, it'll either have the definite article, or it'll be a proper noun, which is implicitly definite. And Maria, in this case, is a proper noun. So probably that's the subject of the verbless clause. So this verbless clause, Maria Mater, means Mary or Maria is a mother. And Maria as the subject is one modifier of the implicit copula, the implicit verb to be, and Mater is the complement that's telling us, all right, Maria exists, but how does she exist? Well, she exists as a mother. Both subject and complement, again, are in the nominative case, and they can come in any order. So if we take these two clauses, Simon Pater and Pater Simon, they mean the same thing, even though the word order is different. So in both cases, the verbless clauses, we assume the verb to be is at the core of them, and we assume that one of the nouns is modifying that verb to be to give us the subject, the other is giving us the complement, telling us how that subject exists. And in both cases, since Simon is definite, it's a proper name, so it's implicitly definite, even if we don't put a definite article on it. We assume that Simon is probably the subject. So Simon is a pater, a father. And that doesn't change just because we change the word order. Simon is still the definite noun, and so we still take Simon to be the subject. Simon is pater, a father. So you can see how word order really can be reversed, inverted, turned around without a lot of change in meaning, except with a few rules that we have to stick to, like the definite article coming before its noun. Another issue that sometimes comes up with verbless clauses is how to negate them. Where do you put the u, the negative particle? And generally, the negative particle u comes immediately before the element that it negates. In verbless clauses, this means that it usually comes before the complement, not before the subject, but before the complement. So if we want to negate the sentence Simon pater, Simon is a father, we want to say Simon is not a father, so pater is the complement, Simon is the subject. We're going to put u in front of pater then, because it's the complement, and we get Simon ou pater. Similarly, if we want to rearrange the word order, and our main sentence is now pater Simon, that still means the same thing, Simon is a father, and if we want to negate it, again, we need to put u in front of pater. So now in this word order, that would be the very first word in the sentence. Ou pater Simon. Simon is not a father. Another question that sometimes comes up is why words that seem to be definite in meaning don't have a definite article. And this often happens in verbless clauses. And one of the reasons the article is sometimes left off is that it helps us then identify which word is the subject and which is the complement. In this case, the article will be left on the subject and will be left off the complement. Hegune meter might mean the woman is a mother, but it also might mean the woman is the mother. Even though the definite article isn't in front of meter there, because this is a verbless clause, it might have been left off just so that it's clearer which word is the subject. Similarly, if we change the word order, meter hegune, that could mean the woman is a mother, or it could mean the woman is the mother, even though the definite article isn't there. But because the definite article is in front of gune in both of these sentences, we know that hegune is the subject and that meter is the complement.